This is the Noon News from Montana's news leader.
Good afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Aja Goare. YouTube's headquarters in Northern California remain closed today after a female shooter opened fire Tuesday, injuring 3 people before taking her own life. CBS's Danielle Nottingham has the latest.
Crime scene investigators worked throughout the night collecting evidence following a lunchtime shooting on the YouTube campus in San Bruno, California.
We have a report of subject with a gun.
Police say Nasim Agdim shot 3 people before taking her own life, but a motive remains unclear.
There is nothing that we have received to suggest that there is any link, connection, or relationship between our suspect and any individual that was on the premise at the time of the incident.
Police say Agdim, who was living in San Diego, had an ongoing dispute with YouTube.
I'm being discriminated and filtered on YouTube, and I'm not the only one.
Accusing it of suppressing her content. The shooter's father says he warned police that she was upset with YouTube and afraid of what might happen. One of the questions investigators will have to answer is how the shooter gained access to the building.
It's hard to Monday morning quarterback. It seems like whatever security measure you come up with, there's always somebody working to defeat it.
One victim was found at the building's front entrance. The other 2 managed to escape to nearby restaurants. YouTube employee Diana Arnspiger says she saw the shooter from the office's 2nd floor.
I ran to the window because the window behind me looks over the patio, and I saw her, and it was a woman, and she was firing her gun. And I just said, shoot her, and everybody started running.
One of the victims, a 36-year-old man, is in critical condition. The 2 other female victims are in serious and fair condition. Danielle Nottingham, CBS News, San Bruno, California.
Police say the suspect went to a gun range Tuesday before the shooting rampage. Here in Montana, one of 2 suspects involved in a shooting at a Missoula gas station last month denies the charges. 18-year-old Chase Munson pleaded not guilty Wednesday to 2 counts of attempted murder. Prosecutors say Munson shot 2 victims at the South Avenue Market and then planned to flee to Mexico. Munson's bail was set at $1 million. The second suspect, 19-year-old Ivory Brian, is charged with 2 counts of accountability for attempted murder. The Big Sky High School student involved in a chase with a Missoula school resource officer now charged as an adult. Officers began investigating mid-March whether the 17-year-old student was dealing drugs. When the SRO attempted to apprehend the student, he took off in a vehicle and nearly struck the SRO. The officer fired his weapon at the student's vehicle, blowing out the rear window. Following a short pursuit, the student crashed the vehicle. Officers later located a handgun. They also found a small amount of cocaine and cash in the student's car. The student is now charged with felony drug possession. Butte native and University of Idaho athletic director Rob Spear facing criticism for how he handled sexual assault complaints against a player. Spear is now on administrative leave. The Idaho Statesman reports Spear and head football coach Paul Petrino are at the center of a Title IX violation. The complaints were made 5 years ago against a former Vandals football player accused of 6 instances of sexually assaulting an Idaho diver and distance runner. The university's student body plans to meet with Spear before gathering Wednesday to vote on a request for Spear's resignation or firing. After a domestic violence complaint last year, the Cascade County Sheriff now stripped of his police and coroner certificates. The Montana Public Safety Officer Standards and Training Council voted Tuesday to revoke Bob Edwards' certificates. Edwards was attending a law enforcement conference in Helena last year when he and his girlfriend began fighting. Edwards was ultimately charged with misdemeanor assault, but he later accepted a deferred prosecution agreement. The post-committee review found alcohol, physical contact, and a gun were all factors in this incident. The committee gave Edwards 30 days to surrender his certificates, but he declined. In a statement, Edwards says, quote, "All I have asked for is them to be fair and consistent, and I feel they have done neither. I will not drop out of the race. I have a lot of support, and I will keep doing my job." The Cascade County Attorney tells us there's no legal requirement for a sheriff to be post-certified. A federal judge throws out a wrongful termination suit filed by a former Columbus police officer who was fired for sexual misconduct. Sergeant Paul Caraway was first placed on paid leave after a female dispatcher reported he made sexual comments and advances. Other women in the community also reported sexual harassment by Caraway. He was ultimately fired from the department in 2015. Caraway's complaint alleged he was not given a proper post-termination hearing. However, the judge agreed with the city and police department, saying Caraway had every opportunity to contest his termination, but chose not to. A hiker reported missing earlier this week in the Mission Valley has been found dead. The Lake County Sheriff identified the victim as 52-year-old Michael Wheeler. His body was found Tuesday morning in the Pistol Creek area near St. Ignatius. Wheeler became separated from a family member Monday night when a heavy storm blew in. The cause of Wheeler's death is under investigation. And we now know the name of the Montana woman killed in a crash near Roundup. The Muscle County Undersheriff identified the victim as 44-year-old Shannon McBee. We're told she was wearing a seatbelt as a passenger in a vehicle driven by her pregnant daughter. McBee's granddaughter was in the back seat behind her. Their vehicle was northbound when an oncoming vehicle crossed the center line and struck it partially head on. No one else was injured. The cause of the crash remains under investigation. And authorities have released the name of the man who died Monday morning in a crash near Polson. The Lake County Sheriff identified the victim as 22-year-old Elijah James of Elmo. The crash happened on Highway 93, where MHP says James rolled his vehicle. He was not wearing a seatbelt and was ejected as the vehicle landed in the ditch. Weather may be a factor in this crash, but authorities are still investigating. We turn now to the weather scene with Ed McIntosh, and snowy roads and icy conditions are important to be aware of as we get out on the roads.
Absolutely, and it's just not us. Nationwide, we're really looking at some problem areas. Let's go ahead and take a look at the national map for today, as we have areas where we're seeing a major system that's been moving in through the Great Lakes states with some areas of rain showers out ahead of that. That will continue to move offshore from Boston, New York, out towards Washington. It's still bringing a lot of cold air down into the Great Lakes states. Meantime, severe weather is developed in areas of the south, and while that's pushing offshore, Florida could still be hammered as we get later into the afternoon. Dry winds blowing across the southern and central plains. That's creating fire weather conditions there, and into the Pacific Northeast. We're watching moisture stream in and cold air come down from the north, and that's what's going to affect our weather. Details on that coming up.
Thanks, Ed. We'll check back in. All across the country, Americans are gathering to remember the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. The civil rights leader was assassinated 50 years ago today on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. CBS's Mark Strassman reports.
The Lorraine Motel, where Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated 50 years ago, today stages a day of remembrance and reflection. The events kicked off with excerpts from Dr. King's spellbinding speeches.
Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. Keep on talking.
Commemorations began Tuesday evening at the Memphis church where Dr. King delivered his last speech. His children gathered at the pulpit to celebrate their father's work and legacy.
I know our God didn't bring us this far to leave us.
Martin Luther King III told the crowd the civil rights movement lives on through his father's model of nonviolent protest.
I believe the coalition of Black Lives Matter, of the Me Too movement, of these young people, we're going to see folks coming to the polls like never before.
Since the assassination, the motel where Dr. King was shot has become the National Civil Rights Museum, the host of today's commemoration. Don't let the dream. Despite the civil rights progress over the last half-century, the museum's president says America needs to complete Dr. King's vision of peace and justice.
The issues persist that Dr. King came to Memphis to focus on, and in fact, in some ways, they've gotten worse.
Today's remembrance is also a reunion of the movement's old guard, many of whom marched with Dr. King. They see this anniversary as a reminder of how far America has come and how far we still have to go. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Memphis.
Martin Luther King would have been 89 years old. Still ahead on the noon news, a massive crack in Africa could have major implications on the future of the continent. Details when we come back. But first, Ed has our weather forecast. Stay with us.
You're watching MTN News with Aja Goare, Storm Tracker weather with Ed McIntosh, and farm and ranch news from the Northern Ag Network. This is the news.